Creeking. It's an awesome sub-discipline of kayaking. You might have heard of play boating or slalom or any of the other cool disciplines that you can do in a kayak. And creeking refers to more the kind of water and the opportunity paddling that you're doing than it does the actual discipline. But the discipline's important too because it requires a lot more precision and boat control than a lot of Class 3 boaters are used to needing when they're kayaking. I'm currently enrolled in a class called Creeking Light with Calleva's River School. They're an awesome river school who I cannot say enough good things about here in the DC area by the Potomac. So the class is all about learning to predict rain, figure out what will be running and what won't be. Remember, creeks are typically smaller riverbeds. They are typically up in the mountains because they're tributaries feeding into rivers. It's not always the case, but it seems to be true of many of the ones I've been looking at. And part of the class is learning to read the rain, look at the size of the drainage, look at the related gauges and reference points to figure out if it's running or not, and then get the logistics done and do it. Now, the actual paddling requires a lot of boat control because when creeks are full, there's no guarantee that there's a lot of eddy service on either side. It tends to be more narrow, more constricted. A smaller riverbed or narrow channel means that wood plays more of a factor, which just creates hazards that you need to navigate around. You have to be able to read the water, set safety, all of that good stuff. So there's more going on in creeking generally, but that also kind of makes it more rewarding. So we're going to dive in here, and this video is long for a reason, but I'll get into that later. For the moment, here's the beginning. Clear Shade Creek in Hollsopple, Pennsylvania. Just enough rain. It hasn't been in like 10 years, and look how beautiful it is. Not too hard, but lots of continuous read and run, and this is a famous trout fishing experience. So you'll see people on the riverside getting after those trout. When the instructors first showed up to scout the run, apparently there was no parking because all the trout guys were out in force, guys and gals. So anyway, check it out. Oh yeah, that reminds me. Why is this video so long? Well, you saw what just happened to me on those rocks. Scrape, scrape, scrape. You know, sometimes that happens when it's a low volume river. It's the best way to get through. But one thing that I really liked about this run was that it prepared me for the more continuous nature of creeking. I have bad eyes. My eyesight sucks. And as a result, I can get kind of disoriented and in my own head about my ability to read the river in front of me and anticipate where the water's going, where there might be hazards, and where I ought to put myself. Turns out that just like anything, practice really improves that kind of skill. And on the Potomac, we don't have a lot of continuous read and run opportunities. This, on the other hand, gave us a ton of opportunity to improve on those skills. This whole run is basically navigating between little rocks. And so it's really good practice for creeking because continually navigating through new environments is taxing, not only on your eyes, but also on your mind. And when you start making mistakes, frequently it's because you have these little moments of inattention. And so I finished this run with a much, much better estimation of my read and run capabilities, largely because I spent the whole run trying to improve on them. So why is the video so long? First of all, I just tried to include everything because these runs are rare. It doesn't rain enough to fill these up often, and so this is my historical record of Clear Shade Creek kayaking for the internet. The other reason is that in the beginning of my progression, and even now, I find it really useful to watch videos like this and try to read the water through the screen. So a couple things you can do. First, just pause the video, look at a section ahead, try and plot your own line, and then see what happens. Watch the video and try and tell yourself where you'd want to put your boat in real time, just like read and running, noting where you were wrong, and then go back and look at what the water's doing or what your misperception was in that moment. So this is a tool. Again, this is never instruction because I'm not good at this, but you can still look through my eyes at this section and test yourself a little bit. Let me know if you think that's helpful. I thought it was kind of a cool idea. Another thing you might notice here is that the river is pretty shallow. There are a lot of rocks. I'm very glad to have the code because it's got this big round body and not really aggressive edges, and that lets it bounce between rocks very happily. It really feels like it was built for, like, not for this, but for similar conditions in bigger water. I can see the utility of that kind of hull shape. If you have more aggressive edges, a flatter stern, then when you're suddenly moved to the side by a rock, it's easier for the river to pile up on the edge and force your boat to do something you don't want it to do. The other thing you're going to notice is that my paddle strokes and form don't look very good, right? Because I'm not getting that good vertical plant in front of me. You can see that my paddle is actually behind me a lot of the time. This river is moving at a pretty good clip. Creek is moving at a pretty good clip. And I'm doing a lot of ruddering kind of behind me and doing stern sweeps and bow draws and things like that, and watching the water to see where I can get a good paddle plant if I need it. So think about, how do you paddle in shallow water? How would you adjust it if you were worried about your paddle getting pinned on rocks or something like that? So watch what I'm doing. I think I vetted this technique, and generally people seem to think it works. I think in many ways this is debatable, but in many ways creeking is whitewater kayaking, but more. I think I stole that from Dan Carlin. But notice that we are keeping pretty good boat distance from one another. When things are shallow and rocky and there are not a lot of eddies, imagine how quickly a 10-boat pileup could happen. Somebody gets pinned sideways, there's no room to get around them on either side, and people have trouble turning around and slowing down because it's shallow. So these are the things we're keeping in mind, and we do a pretty darn good job of it, I'm going to say. We didn't have any problems, really. But that's why we're being so attentive to who's in front of us, who's behind us, and what our next move is going to be. I think in anything, and especially in kayaking, we want to maximize our advantage as much as we can. And my advantages do not include seeing little things in the distance. So when I'm reading water in a read and run situation like this, what I really try to do is look at where the water is going. More than I'm looking for rocks or anything like that, I'm watching where the water is. Where are those downstream V's? What's it piling up on? What do the bubbles tell me? And that has really helped me a lot. On that topic, before I forget, one thing that helps me is to look at the color of the water. In this case, if I see a deep forest green, it means it's deep and I can put my paddle there. But if it's lighter in color or if it's brown, that's probably a rock. Luckily, this is really clear water, so I can do that here. go, dude. Woo! Bruce Lee said it, Wu-Tang said it, be like water. The main flow of the rapid in water like this is often the best place to be. So if rapids like that make you nervous, where it's shallow and there are big rocks, stay with the main flow and you'll have the best chance of making it down without having to fight too hard. When there are a lot of obstacles in the river, those obstacles are creating eddies and eddy lines. If you think about a creek with a stone or a rock in the middle of it, downstream of that rock is an eddy because the rock is protecting that water from the upstream current. And then on either side of the rock, there are eddy lines. Now, if you put a bunch of those kinds of features in a river, the water and the difference in direction of the current, the eddy lines and the eddies, is going to want to push your boat around. It's going to want to eddy you out behind a rock if you're too close to the eddy line or you don't have the right sweep stroke to counteract it. And generally, the only problem with that is that it takes your control away and it slows you down. And oftentimes in more consequential water, you really want momentum. You don't want to be trapped in an eddy with a big rushing river going by you because you have less control and less ability to make moves like getting all the way to the other side of the river or something like that. So you want to keep your speed, and part of that is just being able to control which eddies you catch and which eddies you don't catch and not letting eddy lines push you around. Chill water like this is a good opportunity to practice that kind of boat control. And that's especially important in creeking as things get harder and more consequential. I want to be clear. Moving with the flow and keeping your momentum are generally good, but hazards are all over the place. That's why we have rivered beta. It's why we have must make moves, because oftentimes having speed and being with the main flow are not enough to safely get down a rapid. The third piece is knowing what's ahead of you, or being able to anticipate it, or having scouted before to make sure there's no fresh wood. You really can't successfully and safely navigate rapids, I don't think, without all of that. Bad day to be a trout. This is an example of when your reading and running gets lazy. I should have been 2 feet to the left, and if I was in a half slice, I would have flipped. This is also bad positioning. I think I could have continued cutting to the right if I'd wanted to, or committed to the other side. But instead, I know I can get over these rocks, and so I just decided to do that. Oops. Dang. Anyway, I hope you thought that was fun. Okay, at this point, we're approaching the confluence where the Clearshade Creek, the top tributary, is running into Shade Creek, which then is going to take us down into the Stonycreek River. Now, I don't have enough battery to actually record the whole thing, so what we're going to get is about half of the Shade Creek section, which kicks off at the confluence just after the bridge. Coming up is also one of the bigger moves of the day, which is really just like a 3-foot kind of ledge drop. It's a little manky. I don't hit it where I want to, but it's no problem, and it's kind of a fun, exciting rapid, so enjoy. So you notice how there's a confluence coming up here with that right-hand turn. That would be Clearshade Creek running into Shade Creek. This is a good example of how rivers are faster on the outside of a turn. That's also why a lot of times like debris and hazards will be deposited on the outside curve, because that's where the water is moving the fastest. So sometimes it's not a bad idea to take the inside of a turn because the water is slower and it gives you more time to see what's ahead of you. All right, so we stopped here to surf a little bit, and then it's on downstream again. At this point, we were like half-ish way, a little over half of the way through the run. It's about a 12-mile day. Remember, I didn't get all of it on footage, or I didn't get it all on camera, so there's still probably like 3 miles or more, even maybe like 4 miles left off of this video. It's much of the same, no big changes at all. The last rapid has some more significant holes. It's a little bit longer, but very much has the same character as the rest of the stuff you've seen in the video, just a tiny bit more so, maybe like 20% more. So still pretty doable, pretty nice rapid, but of course, if you're going to go do it, scout for wood, it's a creek.
Oh, fuck.
I'm a little concerned for my buddy who's just flipped ahead of me, but he's going to be okay. We've got safety set up, no worries. He's a champ. He gets right back in his boat and continues downstream. Jesse informs me this eddy is full, so I go find another one close by, no problem. But that's something to keep in mind. If the eddy looks full of boats, there's no reason to go charging into it and then knock the last person out or be an inconvenience generally.
Oh, there's the rope bridge.
Oh man, y'all, pollen is kicking my ass here in Virginia. So sorry if I sound stuffy. If you are hurtling down through a rapid, you've got a bunch of speed, you're worried about some water you're about to hit, or you feel a little out of control, keep paddling. Put a paddle blade in the water. That gives you a better chance of staying stable. It gives you a shorter reaction time to do something like brace. It keeps you moving so that you don't lose speed. Additionally, if you're kind of like holding your paddle up here, if something happens, like you hit a rock and you lose an edge, then you're going to have a bunch of weight centered up high over the boat. And if all of a sudden it shifts, you're much more likely to flip over. So when in doubt, lean forward and paddle, and don't stop paddling even when you're driving into eddies, just to make absolutely sure that you make it in. Or if you ever get screwed up by a feature or a rock or something, make sure to look back at it like you're offended that it derailed your progress down the river. I don't know why I do that. I should really have my eyes in front of me, huh?
I can't hear him, so I'm going to eddy out.
When in doubt, if you hear somebody trying to communicate with you, it's a good idea to stop if it's safe, to make sure you get whatever input before you keep going downstream. All right, I know this is kind of boring, but like I said, we're documenting it for posterity. I'll say two things before it picks up a little bit at the end here, and you can see what that's like. The first is this is a gorgeous run. It's rare, so if it's in and you have the opportunity to paddle it, definitely go do that. The second thing is massive thank you to the group. The instructors were incredible. It's always great to paddle with this group of people, particularly Chad helped us out on the highway when we had a little issue, and Adam for helping to carpool. My eyes aren't so good, so it's not always easy for me to get places if it involves a lot of like night driving on the highway. And people in kayaking are always so cool about carpooling. It's a great way to get to know one another and keep one another entertained on like a 3.5 hour drive from DC. So just an amazing day, and such a beautiful section. So good times. If you watched all of this, thank you. I hope you found it useful. And if you skipped to the end, then well, thanks for tuning in to begin with. The GoPro's dying.